Hello, everyone. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. And I was actually listening a bit the presentation earlier by Dr. James about hybrid learning. That was pretty cool and interesting. Right now, I'm actually want to talk a little bit something quite different, and it's about scientific communication. I'm not sure how many of you here doing research, and I guess some of you were thinking that, well, research is all about, getting through the literature review, get into the lab, and probably write a few thesis, dissertation, and paper, and that's it. But actually, it's more than that, because when you think about the entire process of research, it starts with the discovery and then authoring. And last and not least, is about outreaching. That's because there's very often that people publish a lot of paper and you just kind of stuck it in the library shelf and nobody read your paper. And some of you probably know very well that citation is the currency of research. At the end of the day, a lot of your performance could be measured by citation, whether you're using Scopus website, ISI, doesn't really matter. But then without the citation, quite likely it affect your university ranking as well. So it's quite a lot of pressure on that. And to some cases, we heard about either publish or perish. That's the kind of phenomena we see. That's why we do have researcher more like factory, keep producing paper. But let me go through a little bit on the ecosystem here and tell you why the so-called scientific communication important. That's one thing. And the other thing is why we talk about AI, artificial intelligence. Now, I'm not the expert in AI, so please don't ask me some tough question about AI. But basically, there are many tools out there could help you to write your paper, to do your research, to do literature review, and so on and so forth. It's almost like, the metaphor is like when you drive around this day, I hope not everyone, but some of you probably still rely on the GPS. And I hope you still can drive without GPS, right? So, well, GPS is a very good tool helping you navigate around. But then again, you also have to know that you could not just rely 100% with GPS. It might bring you to the wrong places. So the same for AI when you're using it. I guess some of you familiar with using Grammarly. It's pretty much the same thing here. All right, so what's the ecosystem about the university and the research and so on and so forth? So you can see the slide here. We have university, we have funders, we have library, and then a bunch of researchers. I know that this picture doesn't represent some of you well because this professor look quite old, but don't worry. University in general, they do care a lot about the ranking, right? So you talk about QS ranking, time higher education ranking, or even so-called Shanghai ranking. I guess you might know that 30% or more of their criteria rely on research, publication, or citation. So that's quite significant. So that's why we do see a lot of university, like for example, like Malaysia, we do have RU, Research University, putting a lot of effort in research and publication because that actually changed the performance in terms of ranking. Now, at the same time, when we talk about funders here, we're not just talking about within the country, we're talking about globally. We're talking about people like, Gates Foundation, NIH, and all over the world. So we heard about Plan S, which started about a year back, which means most researchers get the European funding. You need to publish your paper in open access. And pretty much the same in the United States. I think the Biden administration is moving forward with that. Probably another couple of years is kind of compulsory. If you're taking funding from the United States, you have to publish in open access. Now in Asia, people are still skeptical because kind of concerned about predatory publishers. People start saying that, well, does it mean when I pay money, I could get my paper published in all the different places? Well, so yes and no, but it's not necessarily means that they're not doing the peer review. A matter of fact, the biggest open access publishers are people like Elsevier, Nature, which are some of the top publishers in the world. So it is not really means that because you pay money and publish is bad or no journal. A matter of fact, OA is actually become quite essential for the for the reason that you want to make it accessible to many people. So what next then? Then the publisher need to respond to that, right? Because when you think about making a lot of these papers accessible, yet there's a concern people cannot find the paper, and in fact, there are also a lot of young students nowadays, they use Google search, then how to find all this paper? You could start seeing that publishers start asking something quite different now. So when you submit a paper, they start asking for plain language summary, not just abstract. In fact, in the old day, some people were wondering what's different between plain language summary and abstract. And also, there are cases that asking for graphical abstract as well, or video abstract, and so on. And that is pretty much the reason that you had to start thinking about AI tool, because in response to this, that's mean a lot of a job for researchers. And what AI tool could help you in many ways is that it assists you for reading, finding, drawing to some extent. I will start to tell you some of the tools shortly. And in the library, which is more interesting, is that you don't see a lot of AI tool right now. In fact, generally in the library, you see a lot of references, full text. I think one of the earliest tool you probably heard about is a reference management tool like EndNote, Mendeley. But I think in the recent years, something that getting very popular is called Authenticate or Turnitin. And actually, that is a tool that pretty much we can call it an AI tool, because the backbone of it is really using the algorithm doing the reading of the full text coming from Crossref. And that's how they could make the comparison and then measure the similarity percentage. So what else is coming is actually more sophisticated, and they are actually using something quite similar. For example, there's a tool called Scholarly from UK. It's actually helping researchers to do literature review. You know, as a young researcher, you probably have to read about 100 papers a year, basically for your literature, preparing your program and so on and so forth. So reading those 100 papers just manually never be easy, right? So imagine you have a tool could scan through and extract out the highlight and look at the methodology and discussion from a different perspective. That could be quite useful for you as a researcher. So the other thing is this has come to the point that we need to know, after you've done all this, how you share your research. And actually, nowadays we have a lot more channel to share your research, because we no longer just publish alone. You could think about social medias, landing pages, blogs, and so on. And this has come to the point that some researchers also start making video abstract. And actually, it's quite important to have video abstract. If it's just like movie, you know, before you start watching Black Panther, you probably want to watch the movie teaser. And the same thing for your paper. You could have a teaser of your paper, and preferably is something like a video. So this is what I would like to kind of share more as we go along. What are these important factors for AI and communication? So number one, I will start talking about the machine learning tool, which is the AI part. The second part is really about the channels, what are the channels available, and last but not least, besides we have all the tools, what are the skills for researchers? So let's talk about the tools. So some of the things in the tools, as I mentioned earlier in the library, is mostly are the citations and references, full text. But over time, there are some of the AI tool could be quite useful for researchers, and they do have a free access. In fact, I do recommend some young researchers, you go ahead to play around with that. But definitely you need a little bit of tech savvy to know that. In fact, earlier I heard about Dr. James sharing about hybrid, and I think someone was asking about question like technologies and things like that. Yep, I guess in today's world, you've got to be quite tech savvy in order to do your job, in order to do your learning. The same thing here, even for research. Now, there's one tool that to begin with is called X-Cite. Now, X-Cite is actually same thing, kind of like turn it in. It scans through all the paper, it reads through the paper by the computers, and it actually identifies the citation type. Now, I know some of you probably familiar with citation because you use Web of Science, Scopus, or Google Scholar, but those tools, they actually count citation. So that's kind of the foundation for your H-index, for example. Or it's the same thing for journal if you match the impact factor. But X-Cite could tell whether the citation is positive or negative. You know, people could cite your work for a lot of reasons. Could be a good reason, but at the same time could be a critics, negative feedback about your paper. But in the world of counting citation, sometimes nobody cares, right? Even people criticize your work, you feel happy about that because that's one citation. But X-Cite differentiate that. And it actually helps researchers to investigate further what's going on within the topic. The second tool is Scholarly. I mentioned briefly early on. It's meant for literature review. So if you read like about 100 paper years, and every single paper, you probably need about 7 to 10 passes in order to understand the work. Hopefully, Scholarly can reduce that because it actually dissects the paper in a different way. Now, I'm not sure how you read those papers. Don't try to read paper like reading storybook or novel. When I read the paper, I'll start with the title, the abstract, and most of the time I don't dive in. I go all the way to the back. I look at the conclusion. I look for pictures. If there are pictures, no picture, that would be hard. So I actually navigate around the entire paper to look for clues. I don't read from top to bottom because it's very difficult to digest those papers if you start from top to bottom, like the way you're reading books. So Scholarly is actually help to digest the paper in a different way to speed up the process of comprehending the paper. The third one is Writeful. Writeful is actually pretty similar to Grammarly. The difference is that Grammarly is supposed to help you with writing good English. So if you want to write a good report or storybook, you probably have to use Grammarly. But if you want to write a paper, scientific paper, Writeful is a better option. The reason is that because again, they scan through all the paper of the different discipline and they could give you recommendation the way of different discipline writing a papers so that it's been aligned professionally. Now take for example, some of the scientific people, they just like to write English in the passive form. Now, if you try to write a lot of the thing in the passive form in Grammarly, they keep on alerting you all the time. That's kind of irritating. So Writeful is more meant for scientific paper writing, whereas Grammarly is for good English writing. So it's a two different too. The last one is the MinderGraph. MinderGraph is actually helping researchers to do designing poster, graphical abstract. Now, why you need AI here? Because it scans through the paper, it's trying to extract different kind of graphical abstract sample and let you to choose and match it and create into poster. So these are some of the things that is really helping you to facilitate you when you are in the world of so much information. So whether you are reading, whether you are looking at citation, writing, or even drawing something, there are always some AI tools here to help you. But one of the things I think I want to highlight at this point is that it's not about being very tech savvy using the tool. I think you have to start using all this AI tool because you have to start to familiar with the choice of word, choice of language. You see, when you think about research, it's not about just going to the lab and discover something. You need to publish, you need to write. If you don't like to write and don't like to read, you cannot be a researcher. So you have to be someone who likes to read and write. And the way you write, it has to be something that go along with the community that sound familiar with that. And the community we are looking at is not within your research community, but it's a wider community. And this is where things get a bit tricky. Because, like for example, I'm a material science researcher and I'm actually specialized in polymer. So when I talk a lot of stuff using polymer, it can be quite difficult for other people to understand. So for example, when I go home and my dad and mom ask me, what is polymer? I will say that, well, it's plastic. Okay, plastic, everybody know, but polymer, not many people know, right? But if I talk to someone who are in the field, well, I say that, well, polymer is macromolecule. Well, okay, you know what's macromolecule, but you don't ask your dad and mom to understand that. That's a different thing. I mean, even for me to talk to my colleague about polyethylene, that's the most basic polymer, but not everybody know what is polyethylene, take for example. So again, you have to find a way to cross-disciplinary in order to seek for funding, in order to seek for collaboration. This is the world that we are in now. And that whole communication is very important. And getting familiar with AI is actually letting you to know more how to choose the right word and right language to communicate across. And I'll get into that more as we go along. So the channel, now I have to start talking about channel because like I said earlier on, we use AI, you want to get familiar with the language. And because also the channel we are looking at. Now you look at the channel here. On the left-hand side is you, the researcher. But on the right side, I mean, on the left side is you, the researcher. And on the right side is the community. Now, a lot of researchers always say that, well, research is only meant for researcher. Yes, I agree. So if I'm doing polymer, does it mean my research only meant for polymer researcher? Well, yes and no. Even in polymer, there's so many areas I'm not even familiar with. For example, I'm actually specialized in Raman spectroscopy on composite material. But there are also people doing polymer about morphology, rheology, you know, many other things. Same for medicine, it's so complex. And then you not to forget, you're talking about cross-disciplinary in order to align with United Nations SDG, not to forget to solving a real problem, bring impact to the society. You cannot just rely on one person and one discipline. Just like COVID-19, is it a medical challenge or it is a behavior challenge? I guess you know the answer. So we have to be able to communicate across a different kind of language, scientific language, to the right people. In fact, the best way to look at it is, are we looking yourself intradisciplinary or multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary? Because each of these require different kind of language or keyword to communicate across. So when you write a paper, you requested to pull up some keyword in your paper. That is technical keyword. But do you know that when you go and do Google search, it's hard to find your paper if you don't have the right technical keyword. Because as you go along, they have a wider keyword and the trending keyword. And especially you do Google search, there's a lot more trending keyword you need to familiar with in order to find your paper. And all this thing is pulling it. This is how you call it pulling the attention from the audience because you want to get traffic to your paper. And also there are people actually use social media to push it out to the right target audience. And again, even you push it out, you have to have the right keyword to get people attention. Because even people sign up social media, not necessarily like all the bunch of information coming to them, you see. So this is a basic thing you need to know. And now you start looking at the channel for a researcher, how you communicate across most of the time. Well, firstly, scholarly event like conference, webinar like this, or poster section, or your university might have a repository for people come and search, and social medias, famously like ResearchGate, for example, and some other publishing portals like, Nature, Elsevier, Wiley, and so on, those publishers. Those are the channels you can look at it. But consistently, we actually realize that social media are quite powerful. Now, some people are still skeptical about that because they say that researchers don't use social media. That's not very true. In fact, you look at even Facebook, there are a lot of research community, not to mention even you look at ResearchGate, it itself is the social media. We actually have run through an experiment for the last 2 years, 2.5 years. We actually see that if you consistently push your paper through social media across, you can get download up to 5 more times more than not without social media outreach, and you can reach out to 80 over country. So that's pretty powerful. But to do that right, you need the right keyword to send across. And the best behavior to getting the right keyword is really start using AI tool in the beginning, because that is a very good tool for you to learn about different words as you use it, whether you're reading it or whether you're writing it. Because when you do it manually, you have to learn in a hard way by reaching out to different kind of people. And I know researchers, you are not very sociable sometimes. I mean, I'm not saying you're not sociable, but I'm saying that even you go for conference, you probably just go for conference that you are expert in, you see. I mean, take for example, when I was a research student, I always go to the conference like polymer, material science. I don't think I ever go to a conference about, biology, which is like another different universe to me. So you have to start seeing the different universe, because when you do outreach, for example, like this, you need to curate your paper. And why you need curation? Because you can't just bring the whole paper there and push it up to social media. Nobody will read. Just like I know some of you like to post your paper at ResearchGate, and they, of course, you have to be very careful. If your paper are not open access, you are not supposed to do that because the copyright issue. But let's say your paper is open access, even you post it there, not necessarily people will read, okay? So you still have to create some sort of video abstract, some sort of graphical abstract, and you push it over the social media, engage with the right audience so that they be able to interested to read your paper. So that comes to a point that I want to talk a bit about video, because video is very powerful. It speaks millions words. So think for example, you do a posting on social media, you don't just rely on graphic. In fact, you could have a video. In fact, on the right side is a salmon, so you could have a video if you imagine that. But even if the picture is good enough to get attention, so why we can get so much traffic using social media, partly because by posting it, it brings into the top left corner here is the teaser, and the teaser will one more click, it go to full text. So you don't really just kind of like push the paper across, but you get some highlight, you get some teaser, and then later on you bring them to the open access. And you know what? This is actually quite similar to about hybrid learning, about flipped classroom learning. This is called bite-sized learning, right? Because you think about hybrid learning, you think about those flipped classroom learning. Why is so interesting because it actually trying to educate or trying to influence people with the bite-sized information. The same here. We're using a bite-sized content to slowly get people interested about your paper. So you don't just give them a paper, because that paper information is so overwhelming, nobody could understand. You need something like this, a teaser, or even better still, you have a video. In fact, a lot of people start asking and say how to make video. Well, that is also the problem, because you're not familiar with the right keyword. And this is why AI assisted reading is powerful, because when full text, you go through the AI machine, it pull out all the keyword. It's actually easier for people to make video for you, because a lot of guys who make video are not scientists, and they wouldn't be able to read your paper. You can pass your paper to many video maker. I think they'll stare at you and say, sorry, I'm not sure what you want. You have to tell me your story. Otherwise, I can't make any video for you. So it's the same thing here. In fact, I would like to take this challenge. If any one of you hearing this webinar today, and you do have scientific paper that been published so far, you can send me one paper. So there's a QR code here. You can just QR it, and you've got an email address, and send me your paper, and we can help you to make a video abstract, a draft version. So what's a draft version? We can give you the introduction, the ending, without the novelty. Now, typically a video abstract will make up 3 parts. Introduction, that means is the background of your work. The ending is pretty much the result, the conclusion of your work that could bring impact to the society. The only part that we don't want to do is the novelty, because that is something that we need a little bit of conversation with you as a researcher. Typically for us, it's about 15-minute questionnaire. So we could have that conversation with you after we have done up with the draft. But for today's session, if any one of you have a paper, you're welcome to send your full text, one full text to me. You QR code it, load up your full text and send it over to me. We can do up a video abstract draft version for you for free. So if you are interested. And why the video abstract is so important? Well, if you look at this, for example, have no language barrier. Your paper can be in Bahasa, your paper can be in Chinese, Japanese, that kind of language. But typically, for a good paper, you should have English abstract. But if you have a video abstract like this, it speaks million words. And of course, with your own word, your own voice, that could be very powerful. And usually video abstract is not more than 1 minute. You just have to be able to tell the story very quickly. And the whole intention is to get people to read your paper ultimately. Now, the last part about this communication, again, although I talk so much about AI tools, there's always something fundamental you cannot change. That means how to make full use of citation to find the most unique part of your research. I know some of you are very familiar with Scopus and Web of Science and so on, but I always like to remind researchers to know that the purpose of citation index is not just meant for evaluation. It's not just looking for H index or impact factor. In fact, this is my favorite chart because this is what I first learned about Web of Science when I was working in Web of Science. I used to work with them for 10 over years about ISI and so on and so forth. Now, it doesn't really matter whether Scopus or Web of Science or Google Scholar. Now, you look at the core paper, what it means. Core paper is actually when you first start looking your supervisor and he asks you to read the papers, his paper or her paper. That's the core paper. And at the bottom of the paper, there are all the references. Those are called cited reference. And then after that, you have to go to a library and search for those other people cited your supervisor work. They call time cited. And there are also some of these papers cited the same reference of your supervisor paper, but they're not in the same field. They're called related records. Now think about it. If you're doing manually, the most you can do is cited references. That's why you need citation index too, because you have to find out the time cited and the related records. And you know what? By having all this pool of paper surrounding your supervisor paper, that gives you a lot of information of what you need to do next in your PhD program. That's pretty much your first 6-month job for the first year PhD student. So this is very powerful if you know how to use it. So they are not just meant for H-index, so simple. But I guess over time, as a researcher, you also need to be able to write in a very cross-disciplinary manner, because research is no longer single discipline. In fact, you look at a lot of publishers, they talk about cross-discipline, multidiscipline, and so on and so forth. I mean, take for example, like ACS. It's a very foundationally powerful chemistry journal, but they also encourage you as a chemist using ACS to cross-disciplinary. That's why they have multidisciplinary journal as well. So what it means here is that how you get familiar with that. This is where AI tools kicks in, because without AI tool to interact with your workflow, you won't be able to start seeing different languages. Because researchers are very siloed. They always look at their own thing. It's pretty much like in our human behavior. When you socialize with people, you like to socialize with people you're familiar with, right? I kind of joining a lot of conferences in the past. People are very strangely that you see the Malaysian will group together, the Singaporean will group together, then different people tend to group together. They don't go around to socialize. I mean, except for some few one who tends to know the importance of that. So AI tool is help you to transform your choice of language, because it helps you to see your research beyond intradisciplinary, cross to multi, cross interdisciplinary. So I think that also makes the last thing quite important here. As a researcher, you need to be able to tell story. And to tell story is that you need a storyboard like that. That means you look at the research like a story, like an ideal world minus a reality. Reality is today's world. Ideal is your best imagination. And that gives you a problem and that need a solution. So when you do a research, your introduction thesis is why. And what you're trying is doing is a discussion, and how to do is a methodology. And always the big why is missing in your paper. So when you write a research paper, you have why, what, and how. But do you know that if you want people to write a press release, they're trying to relate back the United Nations SDG, because that's the big why. And that's why when you write an abstract, which is a summary of your why, what, how, it's not very clear. And that's why publisher asks to write plain language summary. So that is the difference between a plain language summary and an abstract, because plain language summary need to relate to the big why, the bigger pictures, to get people excited about your work. So next time when you write a plain language summary for your paper, remember, just include the big why. Without that, it's just another abstract. Right? So if you have all these things and you have a video, that will make it very easy for people to understand. And the video abstract is a background plus novelty plus impact. Now, I know there's a lot of information here today, but one thing I should advise you is that it's going to be a long journey, but don't worry about it. Just jump into it and start using some AI tool. I did mention a few, and it could be a lot more out there. So start to learn about using those tools for your work, because it's really a good experience. Just like, when you start using GPS, I'm not sure how you're feeling about GPS. I know some of you driving, you're probably so used with your Google Map, you just stick around with Google Map. But I'm someone that who like to play around with different platforms. So I sometimes use the car GPS, I use the Waze, I use Google Map, because I want to kind of get familiar with different platforms, so that I wouldn't just stuck to one particular platform alone. So I do encourage you to play around with some AI tool, particularly for your work, like reading the paper, like writing the paper, like doing searching, like doing graphical abstract. There's so many AI tools out there you can use, and trying to get familiar with that, because along the journey, you'll pick up a lot of different language, keyword, key phrases for your work. And you need to know that, because those are a very good guidance for you for outreaching and communicating. Because at the end, the third point is that you need to story tell your work. So my tips for AI, of using AI for scientific communication, is 3 things here. Sort of trying to make it even clearer to you, is that start using AI too. Number 1. Number 2, always look out for keyword, key phrases as you start using that, because these are the things that come to you quite importantly for your future communication. And lastly, use those skills to storytell your work. So I hope it gives you some ideas what research communication and what are the importance of AI tools for your futures research. Thank you. All right, not sure what's next here.
Okay, Prof. Wong, I'm Dr. Arshad from IMU.
Oh, okay.
Oh, very interesting, very high-tech, very high-quality talk about artificial intelligence. I was very fascinated by this video abstract.
Okay.
Because what I learned that it was introduced in the engineering and the natural sciences journals, rather than because maybe in future all journals may be requiring video abstract with the submission. But
I hope so.
but not yet. But is an excellent idea for the reviewers. Because I'm review of this few journal also, but I never came across this video abstract. But impressed by your talk, I just went through the literature, and that the knowledge I saw. So you think that in future all journal will be looking for video abstract? Because what I learned from your talk is an excellent, is a short presentation of all your conclusion and defining your paper, right?
Right, I can answer that. In fact, I'll be very looking forward to answer that, because a lot of people in the early day thought that the video abstract is more a gimmick. It's sort of like just something to get people attention. Actually, it turned out to be, over the time, the video abstract is actually a sort of like a 1-minute introduction for you to understand the overview. Now, if you start looking at the your experience of reading other people, for example, I remember when I first do my PhD, I need to know about laser. Now, I'm a polymer science student, so why I need to know about laser? Because I have to know about Raman spectroscopy and Raman spectroscopy using laser technology. I'm like, okay, gee, I have to start reading about laser. So when I look at the paper, I like, oh goodness, that is speaking grids, I don't even know what they're talking about. So I have to like over and over again. Now imagine that if you have a video abstract, it tells you the gist of the novelty of the paper in about a minute. And it could be an animation. It could be something with some motion. Like we say, video speak a million words. Then you have some idea what that is about. So when you go dive into the paper, you won't get lost. Because typically when we read a paper easily, I mean, for myself, I need 7 to 8 passes, 7 times, 8 times. If any one of you can read any other people paper in one time, and I will understand wow, you should go. You are potentially a Nobel laureate, or probably even beyond. It's hard. It's really
Yes,
hard.
I agree.
Yeah, because because it's so specialized. It's so difficult to understand. So so I think the video is really a icebreaker, basically.
Right.
And I think it become important in the future because there's things easily disseminate online digitally. It's not like in the early day that is very difficult to disseminate. So even you have video, you do not know how to disseminate. But now it's so easy. You can use social media and disseminate. So I could see that in the future, more and more people will asking for video abstract because it helps to improve the reading. I mean, imagine you go for a conference today and you are given 45 minutes. And do you know, your first minute, you can just play the video.
Oh, yes.
And people just relax and watching it like, wow. And you're actually creating the excitement to listen to your talk, you see. And how often people start their conference presentation with their title sounds like Greece language, which like, what is this all about? No, yeah. And by the way, they figured it out, they already lost already. So that is a problem. So I think, yeah, video could be very powerful. The only catch is that how to make that video. I guess that's the difficult part. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
We have one more question from Cheng Lim. Can you give us some examples of AI tools that we can use?
Yes, actually, let me go back to my slide here because I did share that earlier, or maybe just too fast. It's over here. So these are some of the AI tools you could look out for. You just Google search for it, you can find it, or if you have problems, just write to us or write to our sponsor here, Accesstudio. I'm sure they could be happy to help you. There are 4 I'm recommending here, but there are many more than that. One is called Excite, which is helping you to identify different type of citation, whether it's a positive, negative. I don't think they call it positive, negative. They probably call it referring, supporting, or contrasting. The other one is Scholastic. This is the one that helps you to read your literature. You just load it up like the way you're using Authenticate, and they come back to you with a different kind of segment. Rightful, that is something for very similar to Grammarly, but like I say, Grammarly is more meant for good English. Rightful is meant for scientific writing. Just in case you guys wondering what's the difference between good English and scientific writing, don't ask me, but I have to say that a lot of researchers like to write in passive form, so in passive form mean SOV, subject, object, verb. Verb is at the back. But typically a good English is SVO, subject, verb, object. So that's where the difference is. Well, nothing wrong if you write passive form too often. It just Grammarly will alert you all the time. The last one is MyTheGraph. That is quite good for making poster. If some of you like to make poster, you can load up your paper and they give you some suggestion. Some of you probably use Canva.com. They are quite similar to Canva.com, but except that these guys are a lot more intelligent, and also all the graphic inside MyTheGraph are meant for scientific research, whereas Canva.com is more for the infographic. So I hope that gives you some idea what you could look out for. They have I think their models of subscription have a lot of different variety, but you can always start using for the free version. Free, just use it. I mean, I like free stuff. So just use it until they stop you using it. So far, some of these tools, they do come with a free version. Of course, with limited features that you cannot use and that kind of thing. But you can get familiar with that. And after that, if you like it, you could either subscribe to it or you talk to the library, get help, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Hopefully that helps.